And okay, as we come up to the hour, I think we can get started here. Hello and welcome to the Manitoba School Boards Association webinar on communication and branding. Glad you could join us today. For those of you that are new to this, I'll just point out that on the bottom left side of your window, you'll see a smaller window, and that's for some questions. If you like, there's a bar at the very bottom there, and you can type your question in. Feel free to type in that question at any time throughout the whole webinar, and I will answer those verbally at the end. Just for your interest, others won't see the questions that are coming on there or who is submitting the questions, so I'll read them out and we can address any questions at the end. If you're listening to this as a recording, obviously you won't be able to post any questions, but you can certainly contact me directly, and my contact information will appear at the end. And by the way, I'm Janice Arnold, Board Development Consultant here at the Manitoba School Boards Association. As we switch to different areas of the webinar, it sometimes takes a few seconds to go from screen to screen, so it'll load, and just be patient with that. Okay, now I'd like to get you involved right off the hop, and I will switch over here. You'll see a few questions, and if you can just take a couple of minutes to answer those questions, it just lets me know a little bit who is on here and some information, so I can try to tailor the presentation a little bit more. Just go ahead and click on there. Others don't see what your answers are, but it'll just help me a little bit. Okay, and I'll give you a couple more seconds as I see there's some answers coming up there. Okay. Thank you. I think we've almost got everybody finished with those. If you hear a little bit of noise in the background, that's just the street outside. I hope it doesn't interfere with the presentation. And a couple more answers are just coming up now. Okay, I think we've got most people there. So I'm just going to move over then to the next part here, and if you'll bear with me for a moment. I'm coming up, and there you can see me. Okay, so I'm just going to start us off here. And there we go. So I guess my first point is just good communication is not an afterthought. Whether you're thinking of, say, long-term and considering a communications plan as for your division-wide, for example, or communications for one initiative or a specific issue, or even just a crisis communication, it helps to prepare in advance, and you can really prepare for all three in advance. You want to have control, but if you don't prepare in advance, you can sometimes find that perhaps the message gets lost, or maybe worse, becomes someone else's message. You can also lose perhaps the confidence of your community and lose track of the outcome, what you're really looking to do. At the very least, you might lose time and resources as you take that time and resources to turn the situation around. So there we go. Think of it as being really proactive versus reactive. Now, let's go through some things you can consider and prepare for in advance for any of those three situations I mentioned, the long-term or a one-off initiative or something unexpected. You might not be able to include all of the specifics in your plan for the different situations, but if they are as complete as they can be beforehand, you can move very quickly and if and when it's needed, and the people can be ready. You don't need to waste time, squabbling about who the spokesperson would be or perhaps the approach. So first articulate well the issue and why you are in need of a plan. It's important that everyone understands the issue to be the same and has a clear idea of the why. This is just the thing that will help ground the plan and keep everyone focused on the eventual outcome. If you get caught up in some of those side issues, it can quickly become someone else's agenda. So you need to have everyone working toward the same end goal. And let's take an example of, I guess, a board that has implemented some new programming options for, say, high school students. And you need to maybe let parents and students know about those options. The issue might be letting parents know that you've responded to a request along these lines, and if you're unsure of the direction or having trouble focusing your board and administration around the end goal, try looking to your vision and mission or your strategic plan and use them to help you come back on track. It can really answer the why you want to develop a communications plan. Pardon me. Just as you've articulated the issue and got everyone on board, you need to do the same for the goals. State the goal or goals in clear and concise terms. Aside from helping you with your messaging, and that'll get into later, it can help you focus as well. If you find this area getting too large, consider that you might actually need more than one plan and then prioritize them. If you do this, part of the goal or the objective should include timeframes. It doesn't work with something incomplete like inform parents about program changes. A more relevant goal might be to let the community know within the next 4 months that you've completed one of the goals in your strategic plan. Or for parents, you have responded to their request for more options. Or students, you'll need to, a goal might be to let them know their options before the start of the school year so they can take advantage of these. We often get caught up in thinking of only those who are most closely connected to the education system, the students, the parents, teachers, administration. So start thinking outside the box. Those outside the system can be influenced by what you do, or if they're taxpayers, they're obviously influenced by the school system. So these groups can offer a lot of ideas and resources and support. Think of everyone that you could influence or that could influence your outcome. Sometimes having someone else carry your message forward is also the easiest and makes good use of resources. The key here is to communicate your message well and make sure that they have your message correct, or the one that you want to get across. If it's, I don't know, vocational programming you're offering and you need to have good connections with those that might participate in an apprenticeship program or hire new graduates, you can think of outside the box of the division itself. A subgroup then that you should consider within these groups they're both the official and those with authority, such as, say, a chairperson or an editor, but you also want to consider the informal influencers, those whose opinion people value, or who people will listen to and who can help you get the word out. Think about these groups in terms of your whole army of advocates. So just as with your goals and establishing your priorities, as you key in on those points, remember that it can't all be about your interests. You need to know your audience, and more importantly, you need to ask, what's in it for them? So a couple of quick analogies here. Say if you had Blue Cross Insurance and they might want people to submit their claims electronically because it creates efficiencies in their system. But I can't imagine too many people wanting to spend an evening learning how to do this just for their goals. So if Blue Cross, however, puts them in my shoes and says you'll be able to get your money quicker and it can take less time to submit a claim, people would become perhaps more interested. So if there's a mini crisis and the school needs to shut down, parents are first going to ask, where is my child? Where can I find them? And are they safe? Perhaps not, how long will the school be closed? I know division as a board member, that would be of interest to you, but think and put yourself in their shoes. Or local businesses, do they want to hear that they'll have to spend a lot of time training apprentices? Or do they want to hear that they will have a skilled workforce to choose from that will likely stay in the area? So ask, what do they want to hear? What's in it for them? And if you can't come up with a valid reason, you may be off the mark and you might need to head back to your issues and goals. So once you have your key messages determined, and don't make a list of 10 messages. It should be 1 to 3 at the most, and they need to be easily remembered and articulated, something that is a real hook, something that's going to capture their attention. Then you need to keep coming back to these points again and again. Don't let media or special interest groups sway you from your main message. If the media is asking what percentage of the budget you're spending on arts programming, you could really answer it in 2 words and just say maybe 2%, but then stay on point and even lead with something else with your message, perhaps saying, this is part of our school division's multi-year strategic plan to provide quality education programming for all students, and it's 2%. So you will have to hammer the main messages often and using several different communications avenues. So we'll get into more of the communication mediums in a moment. Let's just go over though and switch tactics just for a moment. We're going to talk a little bit about branding because that's part of a communications plan as well. So if I said to you something like Nike, what do you think of? Maybe it's cool or athleticism or high-end. Or if I say Porsche, what do you think of? Maybe it's elite or sporty or luxury. So when people say the name of your division, what image pops into their mind? Does it say the best about you, or is there perhaps confusion, or worse, are there disparaging remarks? If a prospective top-tier job candidate Googled your division's name, and aside from, say, your own website or the web pages, what would be the first 3 stories about your division that come up? If it's not a pretty picture, or the division is really even just a non-entity, what does that say about you? And what does your own website look like? Is it professional? Is it innovative? I hope they hear good stories and that just don't just state your vision and mission, but maybe those stories on your website, do they actually exemplify your vision and mission? Or do the stories that you see on the website exemplify that? Are they good news stories? So that you can then attract the best employees. And in this day and age of schools of choice, you know, private schools or even homeschooling on the rise, is your division ready to compete with any or all of those? Also think of the bigger picture. For viable businesses to stay in your community and contribute to your tax base and offer jobs to your graduates, is this community a community that people want to move to and have kids go to your schools? So maybe take that Google challenge I just mentioned. Google your division and see if there is anything that comes up and what it actually says about your division. For part of your long-term communications plan, you may want to include upping the brand profile. I'd suggest that one of the biggest parts of the strategy is to make sure that those stories that you search out exemplify what your division is all about, your vision and mission, as I said. If you purport to be innovative and into the 21st century, but your own website hasn't been seen an update in 10 years, or if the things on it are even years old, that's obviously a starting point. Oh, back one there. Okay, let's get back to the communications plan itself and what should go into it. The mediums. There are so many, it's impossible to list all the mediums here, and it will differ in each community and as time goes forward. It'll also differ for each budget, but it's a good starting point as well. Along with the various mediums like newspapers, service groups, other websites, you also need to think about the key contacts for each of them. For all mediums, you may also want to include the lead person on your side. If you reciprocate with other organizations that attend in attending meetings, you can designate the key people on your side. Or if the medium is, a social media point, then you might choose 1 or 2 people who will, for example, tweet or advertise or look after a Facebook page. Whatever methods or mediums you do use, recognize that it may take several mediums to get the message across to your intended recipient. Some people prefer verbal messages and others written, but if you use several, don't choose all within the same area, such as Twitter, Facebook, and website. It may be Twitter, school newsletters, and meetings with parents' councils. The days of having just one open house at a school to talk about the issue, or perhaps to talk about your budget, that's gone. It seems like the open houses thing is waning in a lot of areas. Or if you do use an open house, then think about how you even want to communicate that there is one and how to entice people there. Going back again to that, what's in it for them? What's in it for them to even come to the open house? Some people, as I said, they respond to the written word or the verbal or visual, and you want to reach out to more than one audience, so consider using different mediums. Again, this puts you in control when seeking which audience and what gets the actual message out. So spokesperson, this is to expand upon the point in the previous slide about including your lead person for a particular medium. There are some things to consider when you designate that person or people perhaps. Is there an authorized person on behalf of the school board, on behalf of, say, operations? And is it a different person depending on the subject matter? Perhaps it is a subject matter expert, such as the chair of finance or a policy committee, or even your division's secretary treasurer. It might be the person's technical expertise when it comes to their writing ability or using social media that determines whether they're a spokesperson. So one thing to consider when using social media, though, is to find a person that will take the time to keep interacting on social media. It's not just that one-off post and then it's gone. People won't be continue tuning into your Twitter account or on Facebook or some other social media platform if you don't keep current and keep doing it. So who has the time for that? It might be something you want to consider. If you're caught in a crisis situation or need to relay finer points of a very complex issue, you need a particular group of stakeholders to come on side. You might designate your most articulate speaker and one who can think on their feet or is like-minded with a particular stakeholder. There can be many types of spokespeople. Another thing to think about is whether you want a single person to take on the entire load of communicating everything on behalf of your division. It's a tall order and you may not be reaching all of your audiences in the best way possible. Whatever way you choose and whoever, one important factor is that the person has to have bought into the final message and they stay focused. Let's go back there. Whatever you do, they're speaking on behalf of the division and they must reflect those two entities. Sorry, they're speaking on behalf of the board and the division. Your divisional spokesperson is not representing themselves, of course, and they must know the issues and goals and messaging very well to stay on point when they're asked questions that they aren't expecting. As you build your plan, you will need, of course, to account for budget. Getting the message across and building trust and support is the key rather than the medium. So you may not have use of a multifaceted, glossy approach. You may want to avoid the 4-color brochure that could be out of date in 6 months. And if you can get the same message across using an in-house update to your website, that might be just as good. It doesn't, however, mean that you should, have your materials look second-rate. Think about looking professional and instilling confidence, both in, say, your community, your staff, your future employees. So think again about your brand. That also says something there, and you should think about that aspect when it comes to branding. Sometimes, as Marshall McLuhan said, the medium is the message. And how do you intend to measure the results of your communication? To ensure stakeholders understand and are prepared to accept the message, or that you are able to get what you need in order to make a decision to then take the next step forward. If it's communicating, for example, your strategic plan, you might be trying to find out what they knew before and after, how knowledgeable they are. And also, are they knowledgeable enough to then contribute in a meaningful way if you're looking for input from them? If it's the case of crisis communication, you might be evaluating how smoothly the communication worked. If you're using something like a telephone tree, did everyone actually hear about the problem in time? Whatever the case may be, you should assess and measure that outcome. You review, you evaluate, you debrief for the purpose of taking the next step or making the change if necessary, so that the next time is obviously better. So let's do our own little debrief right now and recap those areas. The issue: do you even have a need of a plan? That might be the first question. Goals or objective: what do you hope to achieve? And be definitive here so that you can actually measure it in the end. Stakeholders: consider that there is more than one, and you may not always connect with them through the official lead. It might be that person who you know is going to get the ear of everybody. Determine also, so include in that package, who are the unofficial leaders. There's the messaging and the branding. Remember to keep it brief so that you can stay on point, and it's something that can be picked up in even a 10-second soundbite by your media. And make sure that if you're conveying that idea, is it evident in all that you do? That comes down to the branding. If you're trying to convey that you're innovative, is that something that is put across and that people really see? Mediums: use several to reach several audiences. And spokesperson: it may not always be the same person. So thinking about that and using your judgment there and who that spokesperson should be. Budget: as I said, you don't always need to spend a ton, but don't give the image of a second-rate place as well. And don't only inform one or two groups, just the people that show up at the PAC or the Parent Advisory Council meeting. You might have to look and take several avenues to get the ear of everybody. And again, evaluate, assess what has worked and what didn't so that it can work better next time. And prepare. The point is whether it's that big division-wide communications plan on the budget or a multi-year strategic plan. Is it a one-time issue or is it crisis communication? I think that you can be prepared for all of these if you just take a few minutes to prepare in advance. Your communications plan is only going to be 1 to 2 pages in total, so it doesn't take long to put these things together and make sure everyone is on track. And if you're looking at a crisis communication plan, make sure that everybody actually knows what that crisis communication is and that it's updated on a regular basis. So there. Through that very quickly. I'm just going to move then on to our last screen here. So I see that there are actually a couple of questions there in the window on the left, and I'm going to be talking for another few minutes before we sign off. I'll address those questions. I also wanted to point out that there are 2 resources that you'll see there on your screen, and you can download them if you just select it first and then click there to download. If you don't have time to download them now, though, they're also available on our website for a while. If you look at the top there in the blue Services tab, the drop-down menu says Trustee Education, then you can follow the links through the e-learning. A plan like this, as I said, it only needs to be a couple of pages long. I also wanted to point out an accompanying piece to a plan like this would be a specific tactics portion. And that might articulate something like: Jane will contact the list of small businesses, which were of course compiled as part of your stakeholders section. And she will be doing that in June by asking for face-to-face meetings with their owners and providing feedback with their views on assistance that they can give, say, on the new consumer math curriculum. Or it might be Michael, chair of the finance committee, will provide weekly articles to the local paper for the next 6 weeks, apprising the community of budget issues, the particulars of an open house presentation, and a recap on the new budget. So something like that would serve well in the tactics portion of that. So, pardon me, I'm just going to go on to a couple of those questions, and as I said, as I talk through these and you want to ask more questions, just type them into the bottom bar you'll see there. So the first question is here: our board doesn't use any social media aside from the website. Do we have to use this, and how do we start? So I won't say that you have to use it, but consider if there is any part of your audience that you're missing if you don't use it. Perhaps that's something to consider. If you don't use it, is there another means to reach these people? As the world is beginning to come, I guess, increasingly active on social media, you might find that you have to consider using it, and then consider who is going to be your person. As a board, you may want to develop an overall board social media policy. That's a whole other thing, and if you're interested in that, you can contact me to talk to your board more about developing a policy on that. Some policies that we have seen at the school level, or social media policies, they're more on the school level and say what staff or students are not allowed to do. But a board policy might look something like how it can be used to relay information and messages, and who's charged with getting the information out. So it's really, how do you use social media to benefit you rather than blocking it off. So that's a whole other topic, however. So I hope that helps you a little bit. So one other question there, is it wise to have so many spokespeople? I guess I think you need to consider what you're speaking about. By default, matters on governance and policy or a statement on behalf of the division is almost always going to come from the board chair, or perhaps operational or administrative issues would be the superintendent. So where you're designating different spokespeople, though, it's more a matter of maybe a smaller message, one that isn't controversial, or a technical matter that requires intimate knowledge of a specific field. If you designate a spokesperson based on their technical expertise, using a particular medium, for example, say if they use social media, or they're an excellent writer or an articulate speaker, you need to consider as well their judgment and their ability to stay on point. They're not speaking for themselves, they're speaking on behalf of the division. And when you're talking about social media too, consider the case of, I think it was HMV. They had one person only, or two people that were in charge of their Twitter accounts, and they happened to be downsizing, and they fired those two people. And then those two people took with them the account passwords. So nobody else had control over HMV's Twitter account, and the tweets that ensued, as you can imagine, were rather vindictive. So you have to think about that, and it's not an area to take lightly, and it's not just picking a warm body that happens to have time to do that. So thinking about someone that has judgment. So I'm just looking over there, and that's the end of our questions for today. So I've got on there my contact information at the bottom there in the window. You'll see it in red, jarnold@mbschoolboards.ca, and you can certainly find my phone number on the Manitoba School Board's website. Or if you want to take a look at this webinar again, we are recording all of our webinars, and you can find anything to do with webinars or division dispatches on our homepage. There's the services tab. A drop-down menu will come up, and it says Trustee Education, and there's e-learning over on the left. So you can access these at any time, and I know that our resources will be up there for another few weeks. Once they eventually go down, and if you still need them, then you know how to get a hold of me. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you again at another webinar sometime soon.